funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.
This week on New Mexico in Focus, action on abortion, how our governor is protecting access to the procedure in our state.
So practically in New Mexico, we are going to experience, and we already are experiencing, a stressed infrastructure.
Plus, the exhibit on display now, illuminating and celebrating the history of African American homesteaders. New Mexico in Focus starts now. Thanks for joining us to start your holiday weekend. I'm your host, Gene Grant. The United States Supreme Court has taken over headlines across the country this past week. Two recent rulings have polarized the American public. First, a decision that expands and protects gun rights. And second, the historic 6-3 ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, once again allowing states to criminalize abortion. Now, here in New Mexico, the procedure remains legal. That's because last year, Governor Lujan Grisham signed legislation to repeal a dormant 1969 statute that outlawed most abortion procedures. This week, the governor went even further, announcing new safeguards for abortion access through an executive order.
As long as I'm governor, everyone in the state of New Mexico will be protected. Out-of-state residents seeking access will be protected. Providers will be protected, and abortion is and will continue to be legal, safe, and accessible. Period.
The new law takes several steps. First, it prohibits cooperation with other states that might interfere with abortion access here in New Mexico. It also serves as a formal declaration declining to carry out any further arrest warrants from other states related to anti-abortion provisions. The order also bars most state employees from helping other states in investigating or seeking sanctions against local abortion providers. The court's decision has created an avalanche of legal questions, and the governor's order aims to clarify New Mexico's position as a supporter of reproductive rights. So we start this week with a conversation from correspondent Gwyneth Doland.
Ellie Rushforth, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
This has been a whirlwind week. Quick reality check. The United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. What is the immediate impact on New Mexico?
So it's a big question because the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade has implications that are far-reaching, that impact abortion rights, certainly, but impact many of the fundamental rights that we have organized our lives around for two generations. And so practically here in New Mexico, in 2021, we removed the old unconstitutional abortion ban from our books. And so the provision of abortion care legally will remain the same here in New Mexico. So if you've got an appointment, keep it. And if you need an appointment, you can get one here. More practically, however, though, we know that New Mexico for many, many years has been a place where people can seek and receive high quality and compassionate abortion care. And as that is restricted and banned around the country, we're talking about around 36 million people in half of our states that just lost their legal protections for exercising their fundamental right for bodily autonomy. And so practically in New Mexico, we are going to experience, and we already are experiencing, a stressed infrastructure.
Let me ask you, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham this week announced a series of executive orders. Republicans denounced these as a political stunt, but what is the legal impact of what she's done?
So executive action, executive orders in circumstances like this are incredibly important. And we applaud our governor and governors around the country who have taken important steps to protect patients and providers in their states. So this executive order did two things. First, it directed regulatory bodies that regulate healthcare providers to revisit their essentially reciprocal disciplinary actions It's a little bit technical, a little bit wonky, but basically many healthcare providers are licensed in multiple states. And as these states criminalize and otherwise restrict abortion care and other reproductive health care, what this executive order is attempting to do is shield those providers who may experience essentially discrimination for providing healthcare. So ensuring that they're protected here in New Mexico at the licensure level.
So this sounds, it's pretty in the weeds here, you know? What is the big picture of what we're talking about? What is it that other states are criminalizing that we don't know about?
Yeah. So it's related to the second half of this executive order, which directed executive departments and agencies to not cooperate, essentially, with investigations into safe and legal abortion care. And so what we are facing around the country right now, states are not only passing civil and regulatory restrictions on abortion care that impact patients, providers, and their family members, they're also criminalizing basic healthcare and pregnancy. And so what we already know and what we've already seen is the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes. And unsurprisingly, those who are criminalized, investigated, and harassed are largely folks from communities of color, lower income communities, and immigrant communities. And so around the country, we are seeing laws passed that not only criminalize pregnancy outcomes, but turn people's bodies and their family members and their basic medical care into crime scenes. And so what many states are allowing to do are upending people's lives for basic medical care.
So I'm hearing you say criminalizing of pregnancy outcomes is like, if there's a miscarriage, if something goes wrong, they're investigating this as a crime.
So a couple of different things. And what these other states have done is deputize healthcare providers, anyone in the healthcare system, and require folks in the healthcare system, folks in law enforcement, folks in state agencies, and our neighbors to investigate how our pregnancies progress, our activities during pregnancy. And many of these states have created felony penalties for pregnancy outcomes. And so clinically speaking, miscarriage management, miscarriage, and many pregnancy outcomes are clinically indistinguishable from abortion care. And we know that when folks are investigated for their health, for their pregnancies, not only do they fail to seek medical attention, but they run the risk of not being able to manage their own lives safely. And so many, when I say criminalize, when I say investigate, I really invite folks to think about what that means for an individual's life. So somebody you've never met, an entire stranger, could have reported you for a completely innocuous behavior, could have reported you for a pregnancy loss, could have reported you for any number of activities that you engage in while pregnant, or a family member who helps you get to the doctor or one of those circumstances, report you to law enforcement, who then get access to your cell phone history, your geotagging, if you visited certain physical locations. And so I think it's really important for folks to understand that even if ultimately an investigation does not result in a prosecution or incarceration, which is completely unconscionable for criminalizing somebody's pregnancy outcome, an investigation into your health and well-being can result in pretrial detention. It can result in job loss. It can result in you losing custody of your own children. And so these are really dire consequences of pregnancy criminalization that we frankly have not seen in this country, that we cannot anticipate in this country.
So let me ask you this. Women in New Mexico, people in New Mexico who are saying to their friends and family, strangers in other states, if you need help getting abortion care, come to New Mexico and I will help you. Are they running a risk of being prosecuted for that?
So while I am a lawyer, I will not be giving legal advice on this show. But what I will say is that the legal system is being weaponized in a way that we have not seen before, certainly with respect to private medical decisions. And so what other states are attempting to do, some of them have introduced legislation already, are attempting to attach civil, regulatory, and criminal penalties to helpers, to family, to neighbors, to abortion funds, to ride share programs. So
we're going to take that as a maybe, as not full legal advice, but a maybe.
Yeah, and so I would recommend. Oh, go ahead.
Well, and we'll put some information on the website too. But you mentioned the repeal of that old abortion law. The state legislature and the governor's office here in New Mexico are firmly controlled by Democrats. There's no overturning this. There's no criminalizing of abortion that's going to happen anytime soon. But, for supporters of abortion rights, is there more that they think the legislature and the governor should do, say, in the coming legislative session?
Yes, I'm so glad to be talking about this, because one thing we can never afford to do is be complacent. And certainly one thing that has a lot of us really concerned right now are efforts at a national abortion ban. We know Republican leadership, we know anti-abortion extremists are ready and willing to pass a nationwide ban at their first opportunity. And so here in this state, I'll just reiterate, we can't afford to be complacent, and priority one here in New Mexico is to hold the line. We've had major victories under our belt, securing rights to contraception coverage, to non-discrimination against pregnant workers, and repealing this old ban. Now our job is to not only hold the line, but expand and protect access. And so steps to protect the physical security and privacy of patients, providers, and helpers. We have to eliminate cost barriers to sexual and reproductive health broadly. We need to protect providers, patients, and helpers from attacks that are against New Mexico public policy. And we need to shield New Mexicans from other states' unconstitutional, legally suspect, and dangerous extraterritorial overreach. And so what I'm hearing from leadership within our policymakers is, gratefully, everything is on the table. And I look so forward to working with policymakers and others in the reproductive health rights and justice world to ensure that abortion and reproductive health more broadly remains safe and legal here in New Mexico.
Thank you for that, Ellie Rushforth. Will be following up on those developments as they happen, leading to the next legislative session. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Coming out of enslavement and being property, the idea of owning property and finding sanctuary from the oppressiveness of the South, these opportunities to own land caused them to stay.
Monsoon season has arrived beautifully into Mexico, and the middle Rio Grande Valley has gotten some great rains, but the drought isn't over. Early this month, our land executive producer Laura Paskus interviewed Jason Kasuga, chief engineer at the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. He says even after monsoon rains, farmers, as well as the river itself, will continue to face tough times this year and certainly again in future years.
If farmers were to, say, lose their crops or orchards this year due to a lack of water, what sorts of resources, like are we already at the point where we need to be talking about what people need to do this year?
Yeah, well, I think the resources that we have in terms of helping folks right now are limited in terms of can we pay them if they lose their crop. I'm hoping that folks who are investing in crops are going through the appropriate analysis to determine crop insurance and those kinds of things. I do think that could be a topic of conversation as we get into the next legislative session. One thing I think that you're aware of is at the last 30-day session there was about $15 million given to the Middle Rio Grande Valley to have a temporary fallowing program, which I think is going to be useful, and I know, and this is a hot topic of conversation among farmers. You know, farmers want to farm, right? That's who they are. That's what their livelihood is, and so there is an idea out there. I think that we want to that if we fallow land, then it'll just stay fallow forever. And I don't think that's the intent of the program. The intent of that program is, I think, to give options to farmers. And I think my hope would be if people consider a program like that, especially in 2023, 2024, and 2025, they would be able to use that money, invest in their farm, make some efficiency improvements, and or invest in some drought infrastructure that would allow them to continue to do what they love. But my job at the district as the CEO and chief engineer, I think, is to provide options to farmers. The fallowing program is optional, but I think that's what we have on the table right now. I think that there's other things that can be visited, but I think those are the programs that we have on the table right now, along with, I think, some of MRGC's internal conservation programs to help farmers with on-farm efficiency improvements.
Mm-hmm. So we touched a little bit on infrastructure. Farmers in Corrales have had a particularly hard year. I won't even try to describe how the siphon works, but can you just kind of lay out what problems are related to the siphon and that infrastructure issue, and what problems are related to simply a lack of water in the river, in the system?
Yeah, so the Corrales community faces and has faced an exceptionally difficult year on top of having drought, right? And the reason for that is a key piece of infrastructure, as you mentioned, called the Corrales siphon. And the simplest way to explain it is that it is an underground pipeline that is underneath the Rio Grande, and it allows us to transport water from the east side of the Rio Grande to the west, and allows us to transport a pretty decent volume of water. That piece of infrastructure is broken and needs rehabilitation. And so MRGCD deployed a pumping operation this season to try to provide some water, knowing that we were going to deliver significantly less than what the siphon could bring underneath the Rio Grande from the east to the west side and deliver to farmers. And so I will say the whole valley faces drought in terms of the length and the availability and the time that we may have water, but Corrales is also facing an infrastructure issue which limits our ability to deliver volume to them while we have water. And that is something that we're very much aware of, that I'm very much aware of. That solution is going forward, but we're probably approaching a time where those pumps won't be operational. The river, we may be diverting water and delivering to other farmers, but the river will have dropped so low that we can't pump out of it anymore. And that's why I say I think Corrales' situation is exceptional, and we're taking every step that we can to fix that piece of infrastructure as soon as we can. But my expectation is there will be a pumping operation next year as well. Hopefully that won't be diesel driven. It'll be electrical pump driven. That will allow us to provide a little more surety of water and more continuous operation. Diesel pumps require a lot of attention. These pumps are also a stone's throw away from the Bosque, so we have to be careful knowing the fire danger that we have. And so it is, I want to be honest, and when I talk to the Corrales community or anybody, I meet them where they are, and I acknowledge that they face an exceptionally difficult year this year and another one next year. And it's hard to hear that. It's hard to see farmers and see the struggles that they're going through. But I do believe the district's doing the best job we can with the resources that we have and the process we need to go through to get that fixed. And at the end of the day, that's another project, Laura, that I'm probably gonna have to go seek state or federal funding, because I expect when we get a price tag after we're done doing our engineering analysis, that's going to be larger than what we can generate at the district all by ourselves. So I think we're going to be looking for support from the state and the federal government potentially for the construction project.
Right. So I wanted to touch on rain a little bit. We're all hoping that it'll rain. Forecast certainly in the next week here doesn't look great, very hot and dry. When it rains, my understanding is that the ditches won't just immediately fill and everything will be efficient right away. Can you talk about sort of the fairness issue that I've heard you talk about, and also about how the ditches work when they've been dry and then there's water?
Yeah, so Laura, I think one of the things to remember, because when I talk about rain for the Middle Valley, I also talk about an abundance. We need quite a bit of rain, because when it rains, we need it to make it to the river. And I think that's the first challenge with rain right now, is if it rains in our tributaries, the soil conditions there are so dry that I think the amount of water that actually makes it to the river will be impacted by that, obviously. So one, we need a good amount of rain. And then if it makes it to the river and we're able to divert it. One of the things that we're struggling with at the district and that we are worried about is if these canals sit dry for a long period of time, there's always losses when you kind of recharge a canal, right? The canal is no longer wet. It's now soil and earth that wants to take a portion of this water as well. While the canals sit empty, what moisture is left is often taken up by vegetation that wants to grow. So now trying to keep that vegetation under order. A large part of our vegetation management, especially below the flow line, is dealt with by the water itself, in that nothing grows if it's being drowned by the water. And then the last piece of that is, if we have enough water to divert and begin to deliver, some of our systems are extremely long. The district, I think, has approximately 1,200 miles worth of canals, laterals, and drains, and most of that is earthen. Very little of that is concrete. And so the further you get away from the point of diversion, the harder it is for the district to be able to deliver a sustained volume of water to reach farmers further down the system. And so I do think that there's going to be instances where we have a shot of water, we're diverting it and we're delivering it, and not everybody may benefit from there because of just the sheer distance water has to move. And I know that's a fairness issue, but I think the only way I can really explain that is some properties are easier to irrigate because they're closer to the point of where irrigation is. The further you get away from the diversions, the longer the water has to run in a canal. And unfortunately, that's a reality in a system as long as MRGCDs.
The cost of childcare is out of reach for most families. And so we have waived parent co-payments now until next year. And again, under Governor Lujan Grisham, we hope to make universal access to universal early care and education available to all families in New Mexico who need it.
New Mexico is unique for so many reasons, but its rich cultural fabric might be the most rewarding. Sometimes lost in that history are the contributions of African American settlers in the 19th century. Now, Facing the Rising Sun, the journey of African American homesteaders in New Mexico is a high-tech mobile exhibit aiming to change that. I had the privilege of speaking with some of the people responsible for this work, telling the story of these pioneers while honoring their legacy. Welcome to all of you. Rita, first of all, let me start with you. You have been working this project for as long as I've known you, actually, for quite a long time now. And here it is. Tell us about, how did we come here? What were the circumstances, and how did we end up being in the three places that ended up being the main homesteading areas here in New Mexico?
To begin with, the history of the nation, it was a time of upheaval. The Civil War was going on, had ended, and people were migrating, and they were so it was a time of mass migration, and people were migrating because laws were coming in. So in the South, the Civil Rights Act of 1875 was appealed, was determined to be unconstitutional. And that act actually allowed for all groups to be in public facilities. And once it was decided it was unconstitutional, Jim Crow came in. So in 1883, when that law was made unconstitutional in the southern states, Jim Crow came in with a vengeance. And so the migration of African Americans, one of the reasons for migration was the oppressiveness of these laws and the cruelty and the types of things that were happening as the South tried to re-enslave its African American population. And one of the reasons the West was popular was the 1862 Homestead Act. And that act allowed people to homestead 160 acres as long as they were 21 years of age, had never picked up arms against the United States, were a citizen of the country, but that was kind of flexible, and only had to pay a minimal fee, do basic improvements over a 5-year period, and then they would get a patent to the land. So I think coming out of enslavement and being property, the idea of owning property and finding sanctuary from the oppressiveness of the South. And then you also had the Buffalo Soldiers who were already in the West. And so many of them were in the state of New Mexico, and these opportunities to own land caused them to stay. And then during that period, sometimes people forget there was an epidemic of tuberculosis. So health also became an issue that brought African Americans to the Southwest.
That's interesting. In what's the time period when we first started coming in? I don't want to say in numbers because it was very much individual decisions, but is there a time period we know that the first families were here from the South?
Well, it kind of starts around, so with the Buffalo Soldiers, it's, kind of earlier, and then they start leaving the forts in the, like around 1880 in that time frame, and start homesteading in New Mexico. Your families coming out of the South, I would say, are coming out again in the late 1800s. So the Boyer family is coming out of Georgia, and his vision was to start a African American town, sovereign town for African Americans, and he had heard of the Homestead Act. So he's coming out of Georgia in about the late 1800s, and this is like his fourth attempt at starting a sovereign African American town. And so he just saw opportunities. So between, I would say, the late 1800s and maybe about 1925 or so, you had quite a bit of migration to New Mexico because of the ability to own land.
That's fascinating. I want to bring Marilyn in a quick second. That Boyer story is so fascinating that he walked for 9 months with a student from Georgia to get to New Mexico to make this happen. It's the most amazing thing. And Marilyn, when you look at your own family history, I've just got to imagine, when someone's got to want something bad enough to do it, like this. Your family history. Tell us about yours. How did your great granddad come here, and what were the circumstances?
Well, part of it is want, and part of it is preservation.
Right.
Because when they were in Texas, they were threatened. The family was threatened. The Redcoats had threatened to burn their house down.
Oh, wow.
And a very nice neighbor gave my grandfather and his mother a horse and buggy. So they used that to travel to Oklahoma, hoping that in Oklahoma things would be better, hoping that the family would be safer. However, once they were there, they encountered the same types of things, which is, people want to be in a place where they're safe, where their family is safe. That's just like a simple thing, not even the American dream, but really a constitutional issue, wanting to be safe and have liberty. So when that did not happen, they then migrated to New Mexico with some other families, putting their possessions on a train and coming west. Their goal was to go to California. However, when my grandfather, when they got to New Mexico, they saw the Rio Grande River. And I always tell people it had to be spring or summer because otherwise there would not have been green. So it had to be during that time frame. And during those times, the river, there was a lot of water in the Rio Grande River. Even when I was young, there was a lot of water in the Rio Grande River. And being a farmer, he looked and saw that this could be something that he could raise his family, he could farm, he could plant all kinds of crops, and he knew how to do that. So that got him to New Mexico.
Interesting. Now, where did he settle specifically?
Initially, he was in the Mesilla Park area,
right?
Old Mesilla, really.
Interesting. Rita, let me bounce to you. I'll bring the fellas in a quick second, but let me bounce back to you since we're on that part of one of the three enclaves. How big did it get? How thriving was it? What was commerce like? What was day-to-day life like? That's the part that's so interesting to me.
Well, what is interesting about homesteading in the southern part of the state is most of the people who homesteaded under the 1916 stock raising homestead, which was specific to the West. Right. So they were trying to get people to the West because there were vast amounts of land. And so you could homestead 640 acres of land. So imagine having 640 acres of land, and you had about during this time frame, so around 1920, right in there, you had about almost 40 African American families that homesteaded in the Las Cruces area in these 640 acres.
Swinging east, of course, to probably our most, infamous enclave is Blackdom, New Mexico. And Rita, could you talk a bit about Blackdom and how Blackdom came to be?
So Blackdom is close to the amount of homesteaders that Vado has. You've got about 40 families that migrate to Blackdom. In the early 1900s, they actually advertised in the Crisis magazine, right. Which is a magazine of the NAACP. Come to this place and you will own your own land. You will be sovereign. You can be self-determined. You will have sanctuary. And Frank Boyer was behind that vision. So he and his family come in the early 1900s. He has, 11 or 12 kids, and his children homestead. And the thing about homesteading was the economic base, because you did have to improve the land. And so they needed economic foundation, and the banks, of course, weren't giving it to African Americans, which meant almost all your homesteaders in Blackdom and Las Cruces and worked full-time jobs in Roswell or Dexter, while they still had to improve the homestead. And they did incorporate Blackdom in, I think, 1911. They were trying to make a all-Black town, and they did have their own church, their own post office, their own schools, their own agriculture. but in the mid 1920s, and they give a lot of different reasons. One was the water, another was an insect infestation, but for whatever reasons, it became not viable to work the land, and most of the homesteaders left Blackdom either going to Vado or going into Roswell.
Gotcha. Interesting. I'm looking at the actual advertisement you mentioned a second ago. That's at the exhibit. And I'm going to bring in Eric here. Eric, if you can unmute, I want to talk to you about this. It's so interesting to see historical documents, guys, because big letters, wanted, 500 Negro families, farmers preferred, in parentheses. I always thought that was pretty cute. To settle on free government lands in Chavez County, New Mexico. Blackdom is a Negro colony, fertile soil, ideal climate, no, quote, Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow is in quotation marks. Interesting. For information, write Harold Coleman, Blackdom, New Mexico. No zip code needed, not in those days, that's for sure. And Eric, interestingly, and Thomas, I want to get you in on this too. When you found these, finding these kind of documents, how, adding this to an exhibit, how difficult was it to find? And then, of course, your personal journey, finding them and adding them to the exhibit and getting them done in a technology way as well. It's interesting. Tell us about that.
And yeah, our team was largely an enabler, right? So we really leaned on Rita and family members for a lot of those documents, a lot of that, just a real wealth of photographs from the past and to help tell the story, right? And so part of the exhibit is a touchscreen interactive. So it's really a collection viewer, right? So we can pack quite a bit of information into that, and you don't have to, walk around the room and read everything on the wall, for example. So the but combination of that overview and timeline, the individual family stories, and then the story of the lands, and that was all again driven by Rita's vision and of what this exhibit, the story that it would tell. So yeah, it was great to partner with Rita on the layout of these, how they would be most accessible, how we could kind of easily navigate through this large collection of documents, and then working on the captioning. I had the honor of working with Marilyn, specifically with her family, and kind of talking through all the captions there and learning a great deal about their family history. So really unique opportunity for me to I knew almost nothing about homesteading in New Mexico, period, much less the African-American experience with homesteading. So really fantastic opportunity.
Let's get Thomas in here. Sorry, Thomas, I meant to swing you in here just a few minutes ago. Tell us your approach going in as an artist. What did you want to do here? What was your goal with the documentary?
The biggest thing was allowing the family members to tell their story and, put out what they wanted to be put out there, as opposed to taking bits and pieces of their story and telling it ourselves. We wanted to make sure that the families were able to tell their story and basically put what they want out there, because, lots of times I come from a news background, you interview somebody and they watch it on TV and then they're like, that's not what I said. You take bits and pieces of the sound bites and you turn it into a story. But we really wanted to let the people that we interviewed tell this story, so that what really happened was put out there, as opposed to our interpretation of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Rita, before we forget, we've got to talk about a very important part of our migration, which is the East End Edition here in Albuquerque. A lot of folks, again, this is a big mystery for a lot of folks here, and there's been a big fight for a lot of years to get it set aside as a historical area. That has not worked out so far. Tell us, where was the East End Edition located, and how did it come to be a place for us to get a foothold here in Albuquerque?
Well, it was actually on the Lomas, Wyoming area of Albuquerque. And kind of going back to what Marilyn was talking about, what is so amazing about the stories is the thread of vision that people had in these early times. Mm-hmm. So Dr. James Lewis homesteaded under the 1862 home. He homesteaded 160 acres. He came here for his health. He started two tuberculosis clinics, the People's Sanatorium and Booker T. Washington Sanatorium tuberculosis clinics. But he bought this land and he had a vision, because Wyoming and Lomas, there was nothing out there but dirt, there no streets, nothing paved, but he had a vision. And in 1938, he plots it out with a group called the Fraternal Aid Society, which actually pushed African Americans to homestead land. So in 1938, he plots out and gives to Bernalillo County this 160 acres with homes and parks and a community center, and calls it the East End Addition. And it is a viable and interesting community. And we've tried several times to have it part of the historic preservation, because now car dealerships are kind of moving in, buying the homes, but it's such a vital part of the history of Albuquerque. We'd like to see that happen. Yeah.
So all of you, Thomas, Eric, Marilyn, and of course, Rita Powdrell, and others who put this on, thank you so much.
$500 is not going to change my lifestyle, or probably yours either. But a lot of people, it'll make a big difference.
If you're a parent and you haven't taken advantage already, New Mexico is expanding childcare benefits for tens of thousands of families. The new copay waivers are being funded by federal pandemic relief money, which the state says it won't run out of for at least 2 years. Now, last month, New Mexico in Focus producer Lou DeVizio sat down with the Secretary of New Mexico's Early Childhood Education and Care Department to find out who's eligible and how they can start using those new benefits.
New Mexico is increasing child care subsidies that are already the most generous and broadly available in the United States. Thanks for joining us, Secretary Gerginski. New Mexico instituted these policies, different policies last June that brought down child care costs for low and middle income families. These new waivers are going to help families lower those costs even more. Who's eligible for these waivers and how much could they save?
Thank you, Lou. And the families who are eligible for this waiver are families who are working or going to school and need help paying for childcare up to 400% of the federal poverty level. For a family of four, that's $111,000 annual in gross income. So what we've done is we have said the cost of childcare is out of reach for most families. And so we have waived parent co-payments now until next year. And again, under Governor Lujan Grisham, we hope to make universal access to universal early care and education available to all families in New Mexico who need it.
How would you go about doing that? You said that you hope to do that in the future. What would that look like?
We're going to need to continue to make the investments in New Mexico families and into the childcare providers who support them. We know that in New Mexico right now, we have many communities where there is not enough available care for the families who need it, especially for infants and toddlers and even school-age children. So while we continue to support the families now who have access and are using childcare, we also announced last week that we are going to help build more supply of childcare across the state.
Great. How did you determine the income eligibility levels for the subsidies?
We looked at, last year we extended the eligibility up to 350%, and families could stay on that assistance until 400%. But the governor said, no, we need to do more for families now, and families at those levels still need help. I mean, childcare for an infant in a high quality center costs $1,500 a month. Most families can't afford that. So our ability to use our federal relief dollars and under Governor Lujan Grisham's leadership to say, this is a critical support that families need right now in New Mexico, so they can take those dollars and invest them in their family, build their own family wealth, maybe build towards buying a home, supporting their child in other ways. So we're very happy that we could make this announcement and make this change for families in New Mexico.
Yeah. Now, as you mentioned, the federal COVID-19 relief money, that's where a lot of this funding is coming from. That runs through July. What happens after that?
The relief dollars that we're using actually are available to New Mexico until September 30th, 2024. We have right now just said, let's take this the next year at a time and see how many families need the assistance. And we hope that these dollars will extend as long as till September of 2024. But we will at least continue waiving parent co-payments until June of 2023.
Okay. Yeah, I have that here. Another expansion started May 1st, runs through June 2023. Waiving child co-pays for households at 4 times the poverty line. You mentioned that, and it had previously been 350. That caught my eye just 400 times, or 4 times, I should say, the poverty line. Is the poverty line too low? Does that make this difficult, or do you just calculate those regardless?
Yeah, I mean, I think we think that the poverty line is too low. And so, families making $111,000 of gross income, having to pay $22,000 a year for their infant to receive care, that is not sustainable. That is going to put them behind in being able to save for their housing, for other things that they can do to support their family's long-term growth and development. So we believe that this investment is critical. We want to sustain these kind of investments in New Mexico families. Governor Lujan Grisham really knows that when families struggle to find care or to pay for care, that puts stress on the family, that puts stress on the relationships. And we know that when there's stress in a family, in a home, that impacts the development and the overall well-being of the young children, but also of the family as a whole. So these are the kind of policies that put families and children at the center.
Understood. Now, how can people acquire these copay waivers? Do they have to seek them out themselves? Is there an outreach program or some sort of automatic mechanism in place?
Great question, Luke. We have childcare assistance offices all over the state. They can also go to our website and click on Am I Eligible? And right there, families can fill out the application, provide documentation, and somebody will follow up with them to make sure that all the paperwork is in. You still do have to be working or in school, and how much care you get access to is driven by how much you need. So we're excited to be able to offer that. We're also going to be holding enrollment fairs around the state. May 14th and May 21st, we'll be releasing some of that information so families can come to those sites, get enrolled, have their eligibility determined, and start getting assistance, real money back in their pockets to support their families in other important ways.
Okay. Now, do you have an estimate on exactly how many families this expansion would cover, like a number?
We're estimating around 30,000 families across New Mexico could benefit. We're seeing, I just talked to the staff today, we had 500 applicants come into the Am I Eligible just this past week. So that's exciting. We know there's families right now enrolled in childcare that are struggling to make those payments and are considering whether I have to pull my child out of childcare or how am I going to juggle because I don't know that I have the resources. So we're hoping that they're going to learn about this and they're going to come in and get the assistance they need. And we're also excited that because we're the only state in the nation that has based our childcare rates on what it costs to deliver that care, that our childcare providers are going to have the revenues they need to focus on quality, to focus on their staff, and to paying their staff commensurate with the value that they're giving to the children and the families and into our communities across the state.
Now, we're seeing staffing issues in a wide range of fields in New Mexico. I mean, you name it, they're probably short-staffed. And last week's announcement also expanded grants to childcare centers, subsidy to childcare workers, pursuing professional training. Does the state need more of these workers too?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Early childhood educators are in high demand, and that's why we also released the student success application to our higher education institutions so that students enrolled in their early childhood teacher prep programs, their infant family studies programs can get access up to $2,000 per semester in FY22 and in the fall of 22 and the spring of 23 to support things like transportation, rent, other costs that early childhood educators have as they're trying to work full-time and also go to school. So we're excited, again, using federal relief dollars to enhance, help accelerate, hopefully, their completion of their AA or their bachelor degree in early childhood.
Great, great. Thanks so much. It sounds like great stuff. Thanks, Secretary Gurginski, for your time and your information.
New Mexicans are eagerly awaiting another round of tax relief payments from the state. It's now been more than a month since the initial $250 payments went out, but the inflation that money was meant to combat has only gotten worse. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham and the state legislature passed the plan for two $250 payments after the special session earlier this year. Now, directly after that decision, I spoke to New Mexico State University economics professor emeritus Dr. James Peach to ask how much of an impact those payments would have for New Mexicans. I'm pleased to be welcoming Dr. James Peach, professor emeritus from New Mexico State University, where he taught economics and international business for a number of years before retiring. Congratulations on your retirement, first of all. Got a couple of questions for you, Dr. Peach. I'm really interested. I want to ask you about the outcome of the special session just wrapped up this week, the decision by the legislature to send either $500 or $1,000 to singles or couples out there. Filing jointly, the goal in the session was to ease the burden of rising consumer costs. Does this do that in your view?
It can help, and it's a far better thing to do this than have additional tax cuts. We will need the tax revenue at some point, given the volatility in oil prices.
Mm-hmm. Is that number acceptable to you? Did you have a number in your own mind that you thought, well, maybe this might help? Is $500 appreciably good in your view?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. That'll be a big help for a lot of people, especially at the low end of the income distribution. Mm-hmm. $500 is not going to change my lifestyle or probably yours either. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people, it'll make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. In comparison, the move is along the same lines, of course, as the federal stimulus checks we received last 2 years. But those didn't stop the inflation we're seeing now. Are there any precautions we can take now to help prevent a future spike in inflation?
Mm-hmm. There's very little that can be done at the state level, almost nothing. At the federal level, the measures that are being taken by the Federal Reserve, raising interest rates and reducing the balance sheet of the bank, it may help a little bit. A lot of the inflation has to do with things that are not in the typical bailiwick of monetary policy, and that includes oil prices, energy prices, which have been affected dramatically by the war, Russia's war on the Ukraine, and automobile prices, which a lot of that is due to a supply constraint on chips. Mm-hmm. And food prices are, of course, going up. And a lot of that has very little to do with policies that have been enacted.
Mm-hmm. What could bring down inflation in your view at this point? Like you mentioned, there's a lot of factors out there causing this kind of pressure. Is there any one thing we can look to ease inflation at this point?
A good part of the inflation in the CPI is due to two things. It's due to energy and it's due to the increase in automobile prices. Mm-hmm. As the chip shortage eases a little bit, and there are signs that that's going to ease, automobile prices should at least quit rising as rapidly, and that'll have an effect on used car prices. Mm-hmm. Energy markets are always volatile. That's the whole history of the oil industry, is volatility in crude oil prices. And there's very little that we can do. Mm-hmm. At the national level, the administration has announced the 180 million barrels, a million barrels a day for 180 days for release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Mm-hmm. That's not going to affect international prices for crude oil very much.
Mm-hmm. We are seeing a little bit of price drop, though. What do you attribute that to?
You know, oil markets are so touchy these days that even slight changes in crude oil stocks, slight changes in rumors. West Texas Intermediate hit briefly $130 a barrel one day about 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And today we've got $95 oil. It's a remarkable thing how those markets can change on rumor, sometimes on fact,
mm-hmm.
but what we can expect in the future is continued volatility.
Dr. Pietsch, when can we see some relief here in your view? This is my last question. On inflation, prices, everything else, what's out there that's going to give us some relief, and when?
Well, I think some of the pressures that we've been talking about, energy and automobiles, some of that will go away probably by the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think certainly by the end of the year we should have be well on our way to returning to some sort of better outlook on inflation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dr. James Pietsch, Professor Emeritus, New Mexico State University, thank you very much for our quick time today. Hopefully we can stop in with you and discuss this as the summer and the end of year gets a little bit closer and see where we are. But we appreciate your time today. Thank you all for spending part of your holiday weekend with us. Now, if you want to check out the exhibit we profiled earlier in the show, Facing the Rising Sun, the journey of African American homesteaders in New Mexico, it's running through July 10th at the African American Museum and Cultural Center of New Mexico. And if you'd like to get outdoors, restrictions have been lifted at our national forests. Just do so safely. Thanks again for joining us and for staying informed and engaged. We'll see you again next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by viewers like you.